Okay. Thank you, Emran. I think I'm okay.
Did you guys want an actual official introduction?
Sure. Let's do it.
Yep.
From your actual bios?
Wow.
That might.
I would definitely.
That's why we asked them, right?
That's right. So thanks everybody for coming to OWASP meeting this month. Normally Farshad would be the person that would be hosting this, but he's one of our first speakers along with Kurt. They're going to talk about building secure apps by harnessing the powers of the security knowledge framework and ASVS on Kubernetes. Now, Kurt is a seasoned cyber professional with over 20 years of experience developing and securing software systems. He's attended many security conferences and hung out with us. He's been to DEF CON, Black Hat, Hope, and he's always learning. He's eager to see your code and help you navigate the complex topics of AppSec because he just likes to make fun of us all, right? Farshad on the other side is an innovative technologist with over 20 years of experience in security, software design and development, networking and system architecture and management. He does it all. Farshad spent a decade as a senior member at HSBC's IT security team, and he currently leads this OWASP Vancouver chapter. Gentlemen, take it over.
Wow. Thanks for that. If I had known you were going to read with such enthusiasm, I would say yes every time to that bio read.
Data's the best. Yeah,
that was fantastic.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you for that. And you know, everything that you said in words, just kind of there. That's really great. Thanks for having me. And Farshad, thanks for inviting me as well. You know, it's a pleasure. I'm actually in Ontario. I'm not in Vancouver. I'm kind of on a couple time zones out, but I really look forward to coming out there sometime soon. I'm sure before the end of the summer, maybe, and meeting some of you folks in person. Yeah, that would be really great. Farshad, this is old hat for you, right? Like you've done a few of these talks, but I don't have. We were going to do a quick poll, weren't we?
Yeah. Let's warm things up by asking a couple questions.
Like, do you have the chat kind of in front of you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have it there, and yeah, there's the reactions. Is that what we're going to use, Farshad?
Yeah, let's use the thumbs up if you have, and then if thumbs down if the answer is a no.
Yeah, I like that idea. Should we warm up with should we just try and get, sorry, did I click? So I'm going the wrong way. My clicks are affecting us. Yeah. Should we, okay. So let's warm up. So, you know, everyone's going to either thumbs up or thumbs down on each of these questions. So who has heard of SKF?
Let's see. Let's try to, okay. I'm going to count these. Yeah. Who we got? I see.
Thumbs up or thumbs down. We need reactions.
Yeah, let's get some thumbs.
If we were in a room, I'd be walking up to you guys. I'd be poking at you. It's virtual. So if people have heard of SKF, like maybe it's okay. More thumbs down are better for us because like then we feel like, hey, we're gonna tell you guys something you don't. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like we like that idea that maybe you haven't heard of SKF yet, or maybe you've only Googled it and you're like, oh, I know it's secure. It's a secure knowledge framework. Maybe that's what you know. Okay,
yeah, I'm seeing like more thumbs down than up. I saw about like there we go, more down. Okay, not a lot. I've heard of it. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
What about ASVS? Who's heard of that?
Okay, yeah, let's flip it around. ASVS. Yes. Okay,
yeah,
some thumbs up.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's all the ASVS is popular. Everyone knows what ASVS is. Great.
Yeah. I mean, you can say, you know, I wonder if people who've used it too, if you're using it, you've heard of it. We could have been more specific. She's actually using it, but we said heard of it, but hopefully some of you guys are using it too. You know, if you're getting a pen test back, hopefully you're making them express it. You know, their findings as ASVS findings, like make them do that hard work for you. What about that third one there? Has anybody, this one, I really want to know, guys, get your reactions ready. Who's using Kubernetes in any way right now? Kubernetes in your environment, you've got it, you're thinking about it.
We got a couple of people doing it. Can we assume the rest are not? If you haven't,
no,
not
some up, some down. Like, yeah, right on.
2 up, 3 down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
It's almost
right
equal. Okay.
Ooh, 50-50. That's really interesting to me. Thank you, everybody, for clicking your reactions. That's our virtual equivalent of participating, I guess, right? So yeah. Farshad, you want to read this one?
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, did you like? I wonder if the audience knows that ASVS can be used as a set of application security requirements, or that you can use SKF and what it is. It sounded like most people hadn't heard of it. Yeah. And, I wonder if people know how you can use it to figure out, what application security requirements you should have and train your developers, right? I don't know. What else can you do with it?
Yeah. No, that's exactly like how you could integrate in your training program. That's what we're going to show. I'm curious if people here actually want to know how to deploy an app like SKF into Kubernetes. Like if that's something that people are curious about, deploying containerized apps that way. And I'm wondering if you want to harness the full potential, the full power of the application security verification standard for more secure SDLC, like, do people actually want to start using this ASVS standard to get some value out of it? And I think one of the ways to do that is to use SKF and ASVS together. And I think that's what we're gonna start.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna dive into.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're gonna find out the answer to all those things in a minute.
You were chatting with Raz and some other people before, but I didn't get to find out. Like, I assume there's some software developers here. Developers.
I would say Raz, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you would fall, you're a security practitioner, and currently that, and maybe dabbling in the past life into the ops side.
Yeah, I was never a developer. I was more on the ops side and systems admin.
Cool.
And yeah,
right on.
And how many do we have people that are developers? I know Oscar, I see your name. You're dev. Who else is Amar? I know you've done dev before.
Thumbs up for devs.
Developers. Yeah, thumbs up if you're Amaran. Yeah,
number one target. I'm a dev. I'm the number one target.
You got any other developers here? Raise your hand if you are.
Yeah.
Oh, Amber says, yeah, I'm still a dev.
Developers.
Oscar's doing that. Yeah. Awesome.
Fantastic. And then I guess we said security practitioners as well. So like, people, are you really truly just developers? Or are you also wearing security hats as well? Like, executing, secure scans against your stuff? Are you, having people run pen tests against your stuff and responding to their results? Who's doing security? Are people doing security here?
I see a couple of thumbs up there.
Yeah.
I saw Data using offensive.
Folks.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. And then I see Oscar's doing it.
Oh, right on. Cool. Okay,
cool,
I like that.
Cool. Carmelo, nice. Thank you.
And then dev, like IT DevOps, I should probably say IT Dev SecOps folks, because we already identified some developers, some security practitioners. And so you guys are all kind of IT Dev. In my opinion, maybe you're all like kind of IT Dev SecOps folks, but are you interested in Kubernetes? I don't know. That's what we'll find out in deploying an app into it. Yeah. So what are some takeaways that you guys can expect, hopefully, from our little talk? Understanding why and how to use OWASP, SKF, and ASVS together. That's kind of what we're going to try and show.
And we're going to also show you how you're going to get SKF up and running with Kubernetes on AWS. That was challenging for us. And that kind of prompted us to do this whole thing because, I remember Dr. Kurt said, hey, SKF is great. Let's get this up and running. Yeah. He said, no problem. And then he started going to the project and he encountered there were a number of problems. And then we were like, hey, it would be a great thing to pass that knowledge and then create, a script that people can just use and easily deploy it, which is what we're going to also show you in a bit. And also, one of the other takeaways is that how you can actually leverage SKF to like do better, more secure development, and how you can incorporate that as part of your secure SDLC practices.
Yeah, and your training for sure. So this is our first section: understanding why and how to use the OWASP SKF.
Why and how? Yes. So I think what we're gonna cover in the next few slides is why even use it and what can you learn with it in terms of what SKF is, and then of course with ASVS, like what is it and why you use it and how the two of them tie together. So with that said, yeah, Kurt, go for it.
Yeah, sure. So SKF, what is SKF? It's a secure knowledge framework. And
what does that really mean though?
Yeah, what does it really mean? And like its name is kind of misleading. Like from its name, it's by itself, would you realize that it's actually a web application with an Angular front end that you can interact with and learn a ton of stuff with?
Probably not. No, because when I hear a framework, I think of like, a framework, a checklist or a document, right?
Totally. Exactly.
Totally not. Yeah. It's
totally.
a software framework.
Exactly. It's that's right. And what makes up the secure knowledge framework is these kind of 5 things: the checklists, the code examples, the knowledge base, the labs, and the projects. And there's a couple stars on here. basically saying, you can customize these items. And I would say the projects is like under development, kind of very active development.
And I think the reason they call it a framework is because like you can extend it, right? Like it comes with a number of like built-in examples, but you can add your own, and you can use it as a framework to build more of training and content using that. So I'd call it more of a platform. But yeah.
Totally. Well, we're gonna load it up here. Just throw it on screen here. Yeah. This is so this is our instance, and I know this was a bad idea. It's like, we should totally just be showing videos right now, not doing anything live.
Live demo.
Like it was an insane idea, but this site this is SKF. This is what you get when you install SKF on AWS, and we're gonna share a tool with you guys today to make this super easy. This is what you get. This is what you get out of the box. And we mentioned in our slide there, you have this concept of projects, code examples, checklists, this concept of a knowledge base. We're going to skip over users and labs. I
want to just quickly talk about users. So I don't know if you noticed, but when Kurt was showing the first screen before he logged in, there was an option to just not use an authentic. It's a skip login, right? So if you do that, then essentially you're just logging in. Well, you're in this mode where you can just see the checklist and the code examples and all that, but you can't, there's no quote unquote write functionality, right? So you can't create a project. You can't create anything. It's just, it becomes more of a read-only tool where you can go and view that information. So I guess the intention is inside an organization that you can have it, that if people just want to use it as a library, go look things up, they don't have to authenticate. But if you wanted to go in and create a project and, do all that kind of stuff, then you would log in with a user. Now, granted, as Kurt mentioned earlier, a lot of that stuff is still work in progress. So, we wouldn't necessarily, like currently we're not using it as a tool where we can go create projects and all that. Most people that are using it that we're familiar with are using their own existing project management tools, but they'll use this more of as a learning platform.
Yeah, right on. Good call. Yeah, I kind of glossed over that fact that you just, everything Farshad said, I'm in right now as an admin. And because I'm an admin, I have a few more abilities like creating projects, which, we won't really do. But what we will do as we kind of move through is, kind of show each of these areas and kind of what you would do in each of them. So hopefully you realize right now that Secure Knowledge Framework is basically a web application. And inside of it, you can explore these various areas. What we haven't really tied together yet is that the checklists, their checklist is actually your ASVS. So this is actually your ASVS, what you're seeing here. This particular checklist. This is your section 5 of the ASVS.
And as you can see, it has both the web and the mobile. And in fact, Kurt, actually go back to the checklist, the main section. I think it has there's, you can see web, mobile, and custom ones. Right. So if you're not logged in, I don't think you can create custom ones and save them. But if you go into authenticated mode, you could create custom checklists. So maybe you want to make a hybrid of the two or a subset of one or the other for your development team, and you could do that there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of where the frameworky concept is playing out, is like they have this area called checklists, and you can, they've already incorporated the ASVS into it, which is really nice. So that's great. You get a lot of this good knowledge here is the ASVS. The knowledge base area is tying together little snippets of code, but also tying it back to CWEs and stuff. And maybe we'll look at that in a minute. I just want to remember, we'll keep, we're coming back to a full on SKF demo. And, I do want to, I think it's important to show that, but we should also explain like a little bit more about what ASVS is. I know when we did the hands up,
it was most hands were up, but I think it's still worth mentioning for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, like I've said many times in the past before, ASVS is great. And it's basically can be used as a basis for testing web applications. That's what it was originally intended for, the technical controls. But if you're testing something, what has to exist, so it also can become a requirement. So it provides developers with a list of requirements that they can use for making more secure software. So it's almost like the whole test-driven design paradigm where, here the test case is, well, make sure you build so that you can pass those test cases. And then, Kurt, you want to maybe talk about metrics or some of the other items?
Yeah, well, what I like about the metric concept is that you can, as you work your way through, you can start to determine like how secure is your application? Is it getting more secure? Which areas do I need to focus on? You can kind of start to kind of measure. That's what metrics is. Metrics are about. So being able to measure your improvements. I like it too, as a metric in the sense of a measurement, a standard measurement, in that like if you're having a third party do pen testing for you and they are providing you results, like wouldn't it be great if they tied it back to the ASVS as a metric, like all your results map back to these items. So that's kind of using it as a metric as well. And okay, so that's metric. Guidance. ASVS is pretty good at kind of like giving you ideas about how to get to that secure state. If you did work your way through the ASVS items and you successfully passed all of them, you know you're in a good state. If you're not passing one of them, you know where you need to focus, and that's a form of guidance to kind of say, hey, okay, so you need to look at your authentication or your error in logging. You don't have any error in logging. Like you skip that entire part of application development. How do you not have any error in logging? Okay, I'm not yelling at you guys. I'm not yelling at you. It's okay, but there's various sections. Yeah. And what about procurement? I wonder, what did you think about that?
Procurement, that's one of my day-to-day things I have to deal with. Like, so when someone is out there wanting to, go and buy a pen test, or some services related to application security, the common complaint is that there isn't an easy way to figure out how to compare one service provider's offering with another, right? And when you don't have it, when you're not following a standard, it's difficult. But if the buyer goes out there and says, hey, I would like to go with a vendor that follows these particular ASVS requirements, then, that becomes easy. If the vendor doesn't follow it, well, then they're out. Obviously, they don't know what they're doing, but then they hopefully find vendors that can be aligned with the requirements from ASVS, then it helps that buyer to make a better comparison across providers. So that can also be used during procurement to make that a lot more effective.
That makes a lot of sense. It's almost like almost like a metric to compare vendors between each other.
Exactly. Can they meet my requirement? Can they test according to this and then this level of depth that I require for these set of controls?
Are they down with ASVS?
Yeah, totally.
Are they down with it? Totally.
Yeah.
So hopefully that explains a little bit about ASVS. We saw a little bit about SKF because we did some poking around at the application. So we kind of have a sense of what it is and the two things together.
And now we want to show you about the fun part. This is the part that really, like I said earlier, prompted this whole presentation, is getting it up and running. And how do you get it up and running? And either with Kubernetes and KWS. So yeah, let's do a quick poll. Let's see thumbs up. No, we already did the Kubernetes, so let's skip that one.
Oh yeah.
Let's do the Docker. So who's using Docker? Let's see thumbs up. I see one Docker thumb up.
We're looking for that reaction.
Two.
Yes,
3, 4. Docker. Okay, Docker's popular.
Docker,
right?
I've run Docker.
I would expect that majority of people here would have used Docker. I still encounter, it's funny, I still talk to people, especially in some interviews, and and people haven't used it. I'm kind of shocked because by this point, even trying to download software to try out, you have to deal with Docker sometimes. So oftentimes.
That's true. A lot of tools these days are just kind of like, hey, just throw on a Docker run and they'll give you an image, and that's your whole life. You're in a container these days. So yeah, I mean, if you're not using Docker yet, you probably will be, and maybe you are using it, you don't even know it. What about who here's using AWS? This is like an informal poll. Who is your cloud provider? Are you guys using AWS? Because this is more relevant if you are. That's why, because the tool that I'm about to share with you guys is basically for AWS. So I'm just kind of wondering.
There's one question I want us to answer. So Sagar is asking, is SKF for multi-cloud scenarios? Kurt, you want to take that one?
Is it for multi-cloud scenarios? Are you asking, I'm not sure the question. Like, can you deploy you can deploy SKF? I
guess across Azure, and
you definitely can. Anywhere you can run Kubernetes, 1.18.20 specifically. Anywhere you can run that version of Kubernetes, you can probably run SKF based on my observations. But I'll get to that for sure. Yeah, you should be able to run SKF in Azure. For sure.
And I think Dana had a couple of good questions as well. Can you set the ASVS level you're targeting in the project setting. Yeah, when you pick the project, you pick mobile.
Good call.
Kurt, do you want to just go back really quickly? I think that's a good, valuable little demo.
Let's see if we can do that here. Yeah, so there is this concept of configuring a project, and it's
maybe make a quick new one. We can...
Yeah, I'm worried that it won't be as happy as, but we'll just call it OWASP fan demo 1.
There we go.
And awesome. Version 1 and a short description.
Short description. Awesome.
No, yeah.
That's the best kind of description.
Here, create, right? And then I think once you're in here, you generate requirements. So there's this like concept of a blank project, and it's like, well, so requirements come from checklists. Maybe they would rename that to.
So I guess that's like the ASVS web. That's mobile ASVS.
Yeah, exactly. So
one, right, that you could.
So once you click web here, you kind of get this idea of like which
there's the levels. Then I think that answers your question, right? Because you can say I want level 1, 2, or all of them. And then if you make a custom checklist, I think Jim Manico was talking about this at the last talk I was at. He was saying that you should customize it because not everything is in scope. Like maybe for yours, a bunch of those things are not. Maybe let's say you're using an identity provider like Auth0, then a whole bunch of stuff in category 2 are not applicable to you. You can make a custom checklist and remove those so that when you make a project, it only applies that subset that actually apply to your organization or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the exact idea of where they're going with it. Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do. You create a project, create a set of checklists, put your the relevant guys in there. And
now see, that's interesting because now they get into a bit of like this project management, which I'm not a fan of because I think they should have left this, to Jira or whatever that the team is using rather than trying to bring it in here. I would have pushed these as like things into Jira after they're done with it, but here they kind of do a bit of that whole, put what's going to go in that
defect tracking system.
What's that?
There's no integration like that. No.
Yeah, that would be a nice thing. Like if I were to contribute to this project, Kurt, hint, maybe you should. Those would be a nice thing. Get it integrated with Jira so that it just syncs up with whatever is going on there and it pushes tickets there.
For sure. And candidly, a big part of why I wanted to kind of do this talk, and I already hinted at it, like SKF is currently tied to version 1.18.20 Kubernetes, which is kind of older. And it's going to be end of life soon. And what needs to happen is there needs to be some code contributions to SKF to kind of get it over the hump, bring it into the latest Kubernetes and stuff. So I kind of, I'm kind of working towards that, and kind of on my journey, was getting SKF up and running. So it's kind of how it's all related.
It's funny. I mean, K 1.1 it is totally ancient, and it's funny because SKF doesn't even go there. So yeah, it's a bit of a problem. Yeah, for sure. So like a big part of this talk, or something that we're gonna that I've been working on for the last couple months, like literally, has been putting together. I wonder if we can like land this in the chat for you folks. This URL, we literally I can share it. I can copy share it.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool. So basically, this is our repository that we're releasing today, and it has basically two ways to run SKF inside of it. And one way on the left I'm showing here is running with Minikube. And I don't know if you're getting into Kubernetes or you're just kind of starting. Minikube is a really interesting way to run Kubernetes. It's like exactly as it describes, a mini Kubernetes. It's like Kubernetes, like on your system, like all together in one, where like you actually would never run Kubernetes like that. The whole point is it's like, multi-node, like a control plane with like, workers and pods and stuff like, but this is like, hey, let's just put it all in like one little system so you can test things. So Minikube is a great, if you're getting into Kubernetes, Minikube is kind of a great way to like dip your feet into it. And in fact, just this like one line of like line 8 there is basically like starts a Kubernetes cluster on your system, like Minikube start, Kubernetes version 1.18.20. Like when that command's finished running, you have Kubernetes running on your local system, which is super cool. And then, kind of the rest of the mini SKF script is really just about cloning it and starting it. And it's all very, and then at the last step there, 24 is about like a Docker compose. You bring up a Docker file and it, you just talk to your local host on port 80. And when you start labs, it talks to your mini Kubernetes on your local system and starts it inside of that. So it's very nice. It's very self-contained. And it like literally you can get SKF up and going in like 25 lines. It's like, it's pretty okay. That was okay. But so that's one way. And I hope you guys will maybe play with that and enjoy that for like a local development. But if you're kind of want to go to the next level, if you kind of want to like take your learnings to the next level, I would. That's what this other script over here is about. It's your AWS SKF Kubernetes release. So what this actually does, and this is in the code releases, it'll use like native AWS services like application load balancers, EC2 instances, Route 53 records. Like it uses the native stuff, and it'll build up a Kubernetes cluster using a tool called KOPS and KOPS, and you can see it in the script. So everything happens with KOPS. And KOPS is infrastructure as code. It actually dumps out a Terraform. So you say, hey, I want a Kubernetes cluster. And it says, hey, here's a Terraform for you. And you go, and at the end of it, basically you have an infrastructure running on AWS that will support SKF. So what we've released in the code base is exactly that. Yeah. So I hope you guys have a chance to take a look. Farshad, hopefully you're able to throw it in the chat there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put the link in the chat there.
Sweet. And you can just visit the site, and you can see I have a little bit of a description of what it takes to get it up and going. And you're probably going to want to try the AWS one. It's you'll see there's a ton of learning in here, but that's what this next slide is about. There's a ton of learning. So I just want to tell you kind of, if you're getting into Kubernetes,
this is what we suffered over, and we're going to pass
so much
the lessons
suffering
on. But yeah,
so much suffering. Does everybody know somebody who knows somebody who's done Kubernetes and they're like, I'll never do it again because it's just too complicated. Like my cluster was working on Friday and I came in on Monday and nothing's working. Like, I don't know. Kubernetes is this crazy, it feels like it's a moving target. And my first lesson is really to use a tool like KOPS. KOPS really simplified the ability to stand up a system, because when you install SKF, it's actually not one Kubernetes cluster, and we're not going to dig too into it, but it's actually two Kubernetes clusters that you stand up. You stand up one Kubernetes cluster that does the web front end, it does the Angular stuff, and it like gives you the front end. But then all of the labs that you run, they run in their own Kubernetes cluster by design, because that Kubernetes cluster is running vulnerable labs. And because it's running vulnerable labs, there could be a vulnerability that leads to an escape. And so anyways, it's separate. So you're actually building two Kubernetes clusters, which is probably two more than you probably wanted to build. So use KOPS, use Terraform. And the other gotcha is really around versioning. And this is kind of what I'm hammering home. Like you cannot run SKF today on Kubernetes 1.23. You cannot. So what that means is that, the Kubernetes ecosystem has changed and evolved from, 1.18 to 1.20 to 1. So it's moved forward. And when SKF was created, it was tied to some of the original deployment descriptor schemas for at that time, which are literally beta. So they're version 1 networking beta kind of descriptors. So right now, SKF is kind of tied to version 1.1820. So it can't go beyond that, because once you go beyond that, Kubernetes left the beta and kind of moved on. Yeah. So that's all I want to say about this. Is there's some sensitivity around versioning. You really need to use the exact versions. You need to know the versions of the tools you're using, including KOPS. Like this tool works with KOPS version 1.2.2. It does not work with KOPS version 1.2.1 or KOPS version 1.2.3. Like it needs to work with 1.2.2. So there's some this is something that, maybe Kubernetes will mature out of, when it gets to 2.0, but it's something that I've noticed. Yeah. And the other two there are pretty self-explanatory. Certificates are hard. And I don't know, developers, have you ever tried to commit a 150 megabyte file to GitHub? Has anybody tried to do that? Probably not. I don't know. Well, if you do, you'll find out about something called GitHub LFS, which is their large file support. Any file over 100, you kind of have to do something a little bit different. And it turns out, KOPS is 140 megs or something like that. So I went to check in the exact version, and then I got to find out all about it. So
the biggest lesson was
patience. It's probably working. It probably is working. I don't know if you've ever tried to stand up a cluster, but it can take anywhere from 10 minutes to like 40 minutes, for real. Yeah.
And it's worth it. I mean, at the end, we got this thing up and running, and it's, for me, the biggest value was the labs that it has, right? Because it's super cool, because you can pick an ASVS item, say, I don't really understand this. I'd like to know, I'd like to see a live example of this, right? I mean, tools like, there's lots of these vulnerable apps, Juice Shop, et cetera, but they don't make it that easy to map into ASVS, right? But this is as a training tool for an organization, you kind of want that, because if you're using ASVS as your requirements, then you also want to be like, okay, well, a developer doesn't understand how this requirement, what it looks like, how it works,
how to learn more about it.
Yeah. And here you can go and they can go to the knowledge base and read more about it. And not only that, they can also click a button and it launches a little application in a nice container that they can go play with. So to me, that's it was worth going through this pain to get it up and running. Now I see, Dana, you're asking, project doesn't look like it's being actively updated, because as you mentioned, like we ran into this problem with this Kubernetes, because so things are so out of date. So that's unfortunate, but we're hoping that maybe we can contribute to this project in some way. And I think there's value, or even forking it or using it in some sort of shape or form. It's a great platform. It has its shortcomings, but once we overcame it, as we've been talking about, and we'll show you some more, it was worth it. So we recommend that others set it up as well and use it as a learning tool.
Yeah, definitely is worth it. And it is, Dana, I think you're right. It is not being, the developer has done a few commits over the last couple of months, like some stuff around OpenID and a few other little integrations, I think, but I think it needs, and that's kind of was in the talk description, is like, maybe we can put a little bit of a highlight on this and show people SKF and kind of show its potential.
It's got a huge, I think it's a great tool, tons of potential. Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully we can, maybe as we keep talking, we can take it to the next level together, but we'll try and keep it real with what it is today as well. So
Kurt, I just want to do a quick time check as well. So we've got 20 minutes, and I think we're going to show you some labs and stuff. And then I want to leave a bit of time for QA as well. So should we blast forward into, is that what you're thinking? We should kind of let's talk about our use case, and then, then we should, and then we can demonstrate a couple of those labs.
We had a slide in here about our Acme core.
Yeah, the use case slides. Let me see. The use case slides have disappeared.
We are missing a use case slide.
Well,
Okay. Well, we're just going to set it up.
We can do the demos. Yeah, let's do the demo. Let's show that the labs.
Yeah.
So the redirect one and the.
Yeah, we're definitely going to. Yeah. So I just want to. We had a slide in here before here that was kind of like trying to set the scene, and hopefully potentially it resonates with you folks on the call. That the solution here is a solution, use SKF. Well, this was the problem. Okay. There's a company called Acme Corp, and, they successfully released the product, 3 or 4 iterations. It's a web application. Everybody's loving it. But they know they have to start being more secure with their application. And they know they need, they just hired a security engineer, and they want to add security requirements into the application. And they're not really sure where to start or what that all means or how to kind of jump into it. So, the idea is like, maybe there's a development team that's already got a great product. They've kind of made it out the door, but they kind of want to circle back and start bringing in security. Where would they start? So that's kind of the journey that maybe this particular person is on. And, that's why they decide to install SKF in the first place.
I found our slide.
Oh, you found it? Okay.
I put it back in there.
Is it in there?
It had left. I brought it back.
It went for a walk.
It went for a walk.
Okay. So, so that company, when they decide like, I have to learn more about secure requirements and how to integrate them, that's what will bring them. That's, maybe where they would start kind of coming into here, and they would start using some of the checklist stuff, and, they could start to get, some exposure to the checklists, and that would be interesting to them. But maybe, and the knowledge base, but it's kind of like, maybe part of the problem is you need like a hands-on example to really understand something, or to kind of start your security journey. And I think that's maybe a little bit where the labs would kind of play out for somebody in this position.
Yeah, because I know even for me that, like, I've been doing this for so long, when I read some of those ASVS items, some of them mentally I can't picture exactly what they look like or what they're talking about, right? So totally. I found this really valuable because I can be like, hey, for this particular one, I want to see an example. So as Kurt is showing you, let's take a look at Open Redirect, right? And they, in fact, I have 3 different examples: one regular hard, or a regular version, and then hard, and even harder. So they got different difficulty levels as well, right? So maybe let's tackle the level 1.
Yeah, we'll start with the level 1. Yeah, and I picked Open Redirect just because maybe it's something that people have heard of, or you've been victim to it of yourself. Maybe like even just saying just saying open redirect isn't quite enough. So you might even just come over here to try to understand like what is this is SKF kind of explaining a little bit about what open redirects are. So you could build up your knowledge base and kind of start to explain in good detail like what is an open redirect, and you could read this through. And there's also this one here you can read through that has more detail. And if you were to read those, they would basically tell you that an open redirect is when in your application somewhere there's a parameter. And that parameter is instructing the application where to go next. Like maybe you're seeing a wizard and it's telling it which page to show you after the wizard is done. And what happens often is attackers realize that they can, instead of showing you the last page of the wizard, they can actually redirect you to an attacker site. And the value of it is it looks like it's your application. It leverages your application URL. But it's kind of putting the malicious payload kind of at the end of it. So it's kind of reputational. So if that's not resonating, this is the whole point of the labs. So let's start a lab. So open redirect. I went over to labs. I typed open, and I'm just going to click start. And hopefully I'll be able to get my lab to start. Oh, okay. Remain calm. The lab, this is probably a me problem. I'm going to, it's unfortunate, but just in the interest of time, I'm just going to switch over. This is exactly.
Thank God we have backup, right?
Yeah, exactly. We've got a backup site. So yeah, it's disappointing, but also fine, whatever. Hopefully we'll be able to get this guy going without any issue. So what I've done is there's also one on the internet that's available for people to play with. If you're not as adventurous, just stand one up and try and do a live demo with it. And hopefully we'll get lucky here.
Yeah, because of the background. There you go. Yeah, what it does, the background is spinning up that container, and then when it's done, it grabs the URL for you, and then you can go to that particular URL to run it. And then basically they're using the Security Knowledge Framework Organization as a DNS or sort of domain to create these dynamic DNS entries that'll point back to your instance, wherever that is in our case. So anyways, go for it.
Yeah, great. So I'll just go ahead and so I got that lab, and I'll just paste it up here, and it'll bring us to, so this is the essence.
What is this?
Yeah, this is what is this? So welcome to the live demonstration site. So you can see I pasted the URL in here for the lab that it started for me. And as Farshad mentioned, it's basically a container running inside of a Kubernetes cluster that's been exposed to an ingress. And this is the name of the lab that we're currently running, which is unvalidated URL redirections. So
that confused me for a bit. Yeah, because like when I first
too.
Was looking at these, I'm like, what is that? Is that an error? Like, no, that's actually the name of the lab.
This is the name of the
lab that we're exploiting right now.
Exactly. And there's a little bit of a description here. And in the description says, craft a URL that leverages the flaw present in the navigation logic of this page. Okay. So there's something about this page and the navigation logic that we're going to exploit using the concepts around open redirects. So, so kind of like, I guess we'll put our hacker caps on for a second. And, usually when we see these kind of challenges or types of things, one of the first things that I often do, if I'm not going to rip out, like go full on with like burp session or something like that, I'll just start with
inspect.
Yeah. Down to the inspect. I don't know if you guys have played with this before or not, but I have my inspector detached from my dock. I prefer this setting here where it's kind of broken out, but it's attached to this guy over here. And it's got some cool features. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to play with this before. It's very, it's kind of fun. You can collect this element selector here. Oops. And with it now, oops. When I have it turned on, it kind of, this is potentially old hat for some of you folks, but kind of allows you to navigate over the site. And you can see on the left, it's kind of following me around. And I just want to click on this button is actually what I want to do. And what it's done is it's taken me to the element which is effectively the HTML of the page here. And you can say, go to the new website. I don't know if you can see over here as I'm kind of moving through here. It's also kind of moving through there. But so I've got the submit button, and, it's basically saying, what happens when you do a submit button? Well, it's going to do this post, and where's it going to go? It's going to go to this redirect, this endpoint called redirect, and it's going to pass in the into redirect a parameter called new URL, and it's going to pass in this /new site URL. So it seems like that's pretty much that's probably the navigation they're talking about, obviously. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to just pivot over here to the net, because I'm going to click that button. Obviously, I'm going to click the button. Always click the button, right? So
always click the button.
Oh, don't panic and click the button. So I'm flipping back over to network over here. So this is going to give me a different view. I was over here at elements, but now I'm over here at network. I'm not sure what's up there. And when I click this button, did somebody stop the lab on me? Okay. I think what's happened there is potentially the lab is stopped. That's
oh yeah, because the thing's not running.
That's okay.
That's the disadvantage of the public instance.
Yeah, for sure. And if anybody's like playing around with me, I'm not saying there, but I mean, somebody could be having fun with me stopping my lab mid redirect, but
nope.
Yeah,
it says it's still running.
Still says it's still running, but it's definitely not still running, because that's usually when the lab's gone away, but the ingress is up. Like, so that's fun. We'll just stop it, and while it's stopping, and we'll try to start it again. I don't know if that'll bring it back to life, but we'll try bringing it back to life with the start here.
Let's give it a try. It never hurts.
Yeah.
What happened to our instance? Because it was running.
Yeah.
We were trying it earlier and it was fine.
I know.
Wonder.
It's demo gods though.
There.
Like it's totally demo gods.
Totally demo gods. Try it again.
Yeah. No, it shouldn't be like that. It should just.
It's not spinning up the container. It's not even launching the.
Wonder. Because I think I was like usually doing it as this person, but I don't think
as the nobody.
Yeah, but I don't think that should be the factor.
No. Something else is stopped in that cluster.
It's making me sad. But I'm putting on my happy face for you guys. Putting on my happy face for you guys. Anyways, videos to follow. We're back. Hey, can you go ahead and not stop the lab on me, guy? That'd be great. Okay. So, and then I'm just going to go, we're just carrying on like nothing happened. And so here I am back over here, the network. Did you see the redirect up here? And hopefully that wasn't hopefully it's not too tricky to follow along, but what I was demoing there is when I clicked the button, it actually did the form post. And you can see here, this is this redirect /new URL and it's going to this new site. And you can see that's exactly what it's done up here. It's gone to this URL. It's gone to this URL new site, right? And in fact, if we go up here and if we just go ahead and cut and paste that into here, okay, you can see we're no longer at that redirect. It's redirected us to the new site. Welcome to the new website, right? So that's all fine and good. But maybe the attacker wants to send you. Okay, so let's put the pieces together.
What if they want to rickroll you? What if?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what if? So I'm sending you to the new site, but what if I just want to like send you to some like inappropriate YouTube content or something like that? Or like, what if I want to send a phish email and it looks like, hey, come to the Security Knowledge Framework labs.org and check out this great new lab that I just set up for just you to play with, right? And
right, exactly. You wouldn't think twice, because it's like, yeah, I'm expecting that lab, right? From
exactly. There's some reputation associated with it, so you might end up going there, and the problem with there it is, yay. The problem is the redirect is literally is redirecting you to not just an app inside that site, but anywhere that you give it to on the internet. So that's a vulnerability.
Being rickrolled.
Yeah, that's exactly. I hope do people on the call it's probably obvious that how that could be a problem. Hey, that there's a portion of your application somewhere where if they submit it with just the right value, it ends up taking that person away from your site and sending them somewhere else. Like that is an attacker's kind of
classic URL redirection.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a simple demonstration like that.
Very simple.
Lab does, right? So it's got a vulnerable application that has URL redirection, so you can go in there and check it out. But then it's got different levels of difficulty as well, right? So if
That's right.
so then, typically my recommendation is that if you deploying this in your environment across the development team, kind of look and see which ASVS items are the ones that team doesn't understand, or if you've done a test to see which ones that the application failed against, right? So maybe you went and got a pen test done against the ASVS level 1, and then you see that, hey, these 50 of them that we failed on, well, maybe get the developers to go and play with these, and also looking at the code examples as well, right? So the labs teach you how the attack is performed. That's helpful, but that doesn't really figure out how to fix the problem, right? So, but the good news is that also there's code and snippets and things like that, and guidance.
Exactly.
It also ties the ASVS text into the pattern from CWE. So it's, for example, if it says that, you should verify and that you have anti-SSRF protection, et cetera, it'll have the CWE pattern that's related to that. That maybe Kurt, if you wouldn't mind showing that, like an example of.
Yeah, I just had one up on screen here, like just to kind of tie it back to the redirect one, right? So, this is ASV item, 515 literally says verify that URL redirects and forwards only allow destinations which appear on an allow list, or show a warning that, hey, you're about to leave my site and go somewhere else. So, the recommendation, the recommendation to the lab creator would be, hey, that /redirect that we were visiting over here, that /redirect, there should be some logic in there that's validating that new URL. And that new URL should only be allowed to go to, and have a list of 10 places that it's allowed to go, including new site, old site, favorite site, like whatever it is, have a list of things that are allowed. And what you'll see with SKF, and we're going to be out of time, so we won't get into it, but what you'll see with SKF on the next lab is, instead of implementing the allow list, they've implemented a deny list. So in the next lab, basically they say, okay, well, with the redirect, you're not allowed to have a period in it. That's the end of the protection. It's not allowed to have like a .com. It's not allowed to have a .ca. In fact, you're not allowed to have a dot in it at all. So it's kind of starts to implement this deny list. Okay. And then the next one's kind of even further. Okay, now you're not allowed to have dots or forward slashes. So you can't make a URL at all, right? So that's not the recommendation though for ASVS, right? The ASVS is to have an allow list. And that's because as you start to implement these deny lists, you'll realize how futile it is. And there's always a way around it. So the SKF lab is kind of working in partnership with this ASVS item to kind of reinforce the right thing to do, which is to implement an allow list ultimately.
Yeah.
So,
and we're just coming up to time. So I want to maybe Kurt, we can go and talk about like the takeaways. Yeah. Let's leave the audience with a few takeaways.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Use ASVS. That's the bottom line.
But I think everyone here would agree. Right?
Nobody's going to disagree.
Use it as your requirements to build and test your application, right? And and one of the things is that you can a fair number of the test cases or items in ASVS can be covered through automated tools. Not all of them. And ASVS itself says it's not the majority, but it's a fair number of them. And then for the other ones, there's quite a few that you can actually create unit tests or things that are not beyond the automated tools. You could write your own test cases and unit tests and do that. And if you augment the security automation tools with some of your own unit tests, then you can get really good coverage. Yes, there'll still be a few that require pen testing, of course, but and manual activities. But that's a good thing. And then SKF can help you get the most out of it, right? As we've been saying, is that the problem that is often the development teams encounter is that some of that stuff is not easy to understand, and there's no examples, there's no tie into like here's how the control patterns, some examples of vulnerable code that's not there in that standard. So this SKF brings it all together, ties it together really nicely, both in terms of static content and in terms of dynamic, vulnerable mini applications that you can play with in form of labs.
Totally. And I hope people kind of thought SKF was interesting and can show interest in it and deploy it and start to learn it. And maybe there's a developer on one of your teams who thinks it's interesting, wants to learn Kubernetes, wants to learn a little bit about how to do Angular or Flask applications. Like this would be a really good one, a good learning ground. You could like kind of double down as a developer by, making a great code commit or, contributing to the project and also simultaneously learning about ASVS. So I think there's a huge opportunity here actually with SKF. And that's something that I'm going to be looking at over the next couple months as well. If you're interested, just kind of, I encourage you to reach out. There's we'll have all that at the end there. And if you're going to use SKF, start thinking about the custom code examples and checklists and knowledge-based contributions that you could use. Like,
I think that's where the most value comes. Yeah,
it will be.
It has some stuff in there, but putting your extra flavor to it, I think that's where you get a lot of value, right? And I've been worked at organizations where we've done that without a tool like this. We've just done it through like on SharePoint and putting stuff here and there. This is a nice, I don't really like to call it a framework, more of a platform that lets you build that. It lets you build your custom code examples and your own checklist. And the good news is that it has a basis, right? It's got all the SVS items in there as a basis. So, for most organizations, that's sufficient. But if you're, like I said, if you have specific use cases, you can add more to it or remove subsets of it to suit your needs.
Yeah. I guess that last one too is just review your security test results to focus on areas of weakness. It's like really like if you do testing and you get results, like tie them back to the ASVS and focus on them. I think that's what we're trying to say there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Questions. I think we've answered. Let me just look in the chat. I think we've answered them as we've been going along.
It seems like it was fairly active.
Does the mention the cops?
Nice. I love it. Yes, Dana. I'm appreciating I'm just going back to the chat. Nice with the JavaScript. Yeah. I like that. Does cops? Oh, okay. Cops. I just wanted to mention the EKS blueprints. Cops does not use it. Okay. So two things. About a month ago, Amazon released a thing called blueprints for Kubernetes. It's definitely, I feel like it is going to be the future for how to do Kubernetes on AWS. It's an open source tool. They actually released Terraform, like Amazon released Terraform, not CloudFront, like the Terraform code, to do their stuff. So I think it's a really interesting project. So EKS, that's what was being mentioned, and the blueprints. So I might be switching my focus from Cops over to blueprints, but Cops is really cool.
All right. I think we're at the end. Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening, and please get in touch with Kurt and I. We'd love to
reach out to
this
us.
Topic. I think it's a great platform. We ran into some challenges. I think there's still a few little challenges, but for the most part, we got it working. And then we've been using it, like I said, for client training as well as for our own internal learning as an internal learning tool.
Yeah. Reach out to us. Find us on the LinkedIn. Say you saw the talk, and ask us about Kubernetes or about ASVS or SKF. Like it'd be great. It'd be great to connect with some more folks, like-minded folks out there. So yeah. So I want to say thanks. Thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah.
Great
thanks.
talk. All right. Before we get to our next session, why don't we take a 2-minute bio break? Grab yourself a beer, coffee, whatever libation you want.
How about
After watching the Coobs, you gotta, you might need something.
Yeah.
And we'll get Brian set up here and get him prepped for the next session.
Sounds
so 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Let's do it. 2 minutes.
And Brian, you're now a co-host if you want to share your deck.
Alrighty. Got that little green button. Let's see.
Now, Brian, have you made your sacrifice to the demo gods?
Oh no, I know better than that. We don't demo.
You've got it recorded. I feel that. Ouch. Yeah. No, for sure. That was my number one regret right now. Still.
Oh,
That's okay.
the
The demo site went down on you, Kurt. It went down for me at the same time. So I'm thinking the demo site's more
sweet. But like I built my own cluster for this exact reason and kind of unveiled it. Like, and I was like guarding it the last few days. I'm like, good cluster. I fed it. I said all the nice things, but anyway, it didn't play out. Anyway, good luck, Brian. You'll do great.
Thanks. No, the toughest demo I've seen is somebody had a live demo and a backup video, and they both failed on it.
Oh, that's gonna suck. All that effort for the video, and the video doesn't work.
I'm trying not to judge that person, but man, you must have done something really wrong.
It's not a big enough sacrifice. That's all.
Exactly. Get your Bitcoins.
Well, maybe that's the problem. It's been dropping like crazy.
Oh yeah, the value of your sacrifice isn't what it used to be.
That's the danger of doing crypto sacrifice.
Yeah, okay, that's what we figured it out. Crypto sacrifices do not work.
All right. Hopefully everyone's got their drinks, libation taken care of. You've done your potty break and we're ready to rock and roll here. So our next speaker is Brian Glass. He's going to be talking about the OWASP SAMM v2 and benchmarking. For those of you that don't know who Brian is, he's had over 20 years of experience in various roles in IT and over a decade and a half in app dev and security. His day job is serving as an assistant professor, teaching a full load of computer science and cybersecurity classes at Union University. He's helped build FedEx's AppSec team. He's worked with the trustworthy computing team at Microsoft, consulted on software security for years, and serves as a project lead and active contributor to SAMM and the OWASP Top 10. He's also contributor to the RabbitV pilot program for election-related technology. He holds several cybersecurity and IT certifications and is currently working on his Doctor of Computer Science and Cybersecurity and Information Assurance. Brian, go at it.
Well, thank you. At least I'm here for SAMM and not top 10, so I can dodge the whole top 10 versus ASVS discussion.
We had Jim here just recently talking about that.
Oh, I'm sure Jim has strong opinions on it. Well, good. I guess it is evening. It's night for me. It's about 9 o'clock on Central Time. So good evening. Like you mentioned, I want to talk some about SAMM v2 and then benchmark. And if we've got time, depending on how fast I talk, how off track I get, I have a few slides in here talking about how we've been incorporating SAMM into the RabbitV for non-voting election technology stuff, which is really cool. I like being able to demo some applications of SAMM beyond just the standard, hey, we ran it in our organization, but like what you can use it for. So real quick on my background, I apparently don't like free time. So I'm married with 4 kids. I teach in a day job. I consult. I work on SAMM in the top 10. And I decided apparently I had a few iotas of free time, so I started my doctorate. So, so talking about SAMM itself. So SAMM is the software assurance maturity model. So this is an open framework, so it's open source. It started outside of OWASP. And then got pulled in later. But it is one of the few structures or frameworks that you have to be able to try and build and measure a application security program or a secure development program or whatever terminology you end up using, but it's the same idea. You want to be able to build secure code. So the idea is we're trying to figure out, and we're trying to build this model that you can evaluate existing practices, and then we try and help you decide where to go. You know, what do I do next? What are ideas for things I can do? How do I measure it? How do I demonstrate improvement? How do I talk to other people about it? Like, can I collaborate with somebody? So some of the language, some of all of that helps you get going. The SAMM team, this is probably, to my knowledge, one of the more diverse globally project teams that OWASP has. So we get a lot of interesting discussions because there's a lot of variety of backgrounds and experiences within SAMM. So the project team runs a pretty broad gambit of different types of backgrounds, different organizations people work with. Seba and Bart have been co-leading SAMM for, gosh, 13 plus years now, I think. So it's definitely been a labor of love. So one of the things, and I don't know if y'all deal with too much with models in that respect, but George Box had a quote and he said, at most what can be expected from any model is it can supply a useful approximation to reality. But all models are wrong and some are useful. And that's what SAMM's trying to be, because we understand we can't model everything, right? So software security is wonderfully complex. Software development is wonderfully complex. I can't build a perfect model because it doesn't exist. It would actually be really cool if I could build a model and just hand it to somebody and say, this is it. This solves your secure development problems, period. Don't worry about anything else. This is it. I can't. It'd be really cool though, but we wouldn't be able to, I mean, we're just not able to. So the hope is on the model that we can build things that are useful to you. And so SAMM runs on some core principles. So, and these, I really appreciate a bunch of these. The idea that an organization's behaviors changes slowly over time. There's no quick fix. There's no silver bullet. There's no, hey, in 3 months, you too can have like perfect code. Doesn't work that way. We also understand there's no single recipe that works for all organizations. We're of the opinion that guidance must be more prescriptive. People are looking for help. They need to know what to do next. And then in general, it needs to be relatively simple. The higher the complexity, the lower the adoption. And then it needs to be measurable, right? Because you want to be able to show improvement on graphs and charts to be able to show progress, right? Because we've been trained up to the right is good. So let's see. Oh, okay. Free time. Sorry, I was just catching up to chat. So project history, just to give you a little idea, every now and then you'll run across a term OpenSAMM versus OWASP SAMM or SAMM. So OpenSAMM was originally drafted in 2009. BSIMM was actually a fork of an early version of SAMM, and that's where its structure came from. And then SAMM was built and then sat there. And after about 6 years of SAMM receiving no updates, a small group, a collective got together of different AppSec consulting people. And we were like, you know what, this is super useful, but it's kind of aging because SAMM was originally built in like peak waterfall days. And so we realized, you know what, we kind of need to be able to catch up. And so we looked at trying to update OpenSAMM, but now his name's escaping me. The gentleman who was the primary contributor for SAMM was like, I don't really want to do that, right? I want to maintain OpenSAMM. I want to maintain my site. I might do something with it in the future. So technically, OWASP SAMM at this point is a fork of OpenSAMM. It's just the only fork that's kind of become the main line just by de facto because OpenSAMM hasn't changed in 13 years now. So we made OWASP SAMM 1.1, and then we started making 1.2 for some incremental changes, and then we realized there was a big change we really needed to make, and it was in the scoring. And then we got into SAMM 2.0, and I'll cover some of the differences in 2.0. And then we're just working on from that. We're iterating. So one of the big things that we put in the SAMM 1.5 that was super important was SAMM 1.0 and 1.1. All the questions for the maturity model, you would answer yes or no. So you can probably guess what's wrong with doing that. How many people deal with it, complete black and white, you know, yes, no, 1, 0 in dealing with software security? It doesn't really work, right? So for instance, say I'm looking at education and guidance, and I have an activity that says, hey, have I given role-specific training to all the people that need it? Yeah, software is binary. It's awesome. So I have role-specific training. I have trained some project managers because that was easier, and I haven't trained the developers yet. So I'm got to answer the question, do you provide role-specific training? Do I answer yes or no? If I answer yes, then I don't need any more funding, right? There's no way to improve this. I'm done. If I answer no, I don't get credit for work I've done. So basically, we realized we were kind of asking people to lie for most of these questions. So we got to the point where like, all right, so what's more realistic is having more of a tiered answer. So we can say, no, we've not started. We've never done anything related to this. There's always more to learn, Dana, always more. So sometimes we can do few or some. So basically we're saying, hey, you get some credit for starting something. And then we can say, hey, I've gotten to at least half. But also notice that this isn't straight linear because it's harder. It's easier to start something and it's harder to make it pervasive. And so your score improves the more pervasive that practice gets within your organization. So in 1.5, so we had 4 specific business functions, each with 3 security practices. No, don't sidetrack me on the OWASP top 10. It's really interesting being part of both projects. There's some weird crossovers. So one thing you'll notice is SAMM is fairly symmetrical, and that's on purpose. So we get asked that question a lot. Why is it exactly the same balanced and BSIM is not? Part of that is SAMM has made the choice to be balanced. So it makes scoring easier. We have gotten into many long discussions over the years over the weighting of things. Should something be more important than something else? And depending on your organization, the answer is yes. However, in the model itself, we have yet to determine a reasonable way of doing this as a more generalization. We've debated trying to support a framework where people could put their own weights. But once people start weighting their own thing, it makes it really, really hard to compare against each other for like benchmarking. So you can say, well, I have a 2.4. Well, kind of, sort of, depending on how you weighted that. But we had, in 1.5, we had governance, construction, verification, and operations. But then we realized something's missing. So anyone want to hazard a guess what's actually missing from this? If you look at all the different sub-security practices here. Security. That's all about security. What in the development lifecycle is missing? So design is close, but if you really look at construction, the construction's kind of misnamed. Construction is all about the design. Vulnerability management. Kind of. There you go. Somebody's looking ahead. So implementation. So when SAMM was originally built, we said, hey, you're going to design all these things. And then there's this black box of I wrote code. And it's not covered. There was no real tasks about I wrote code. And then all of a sudden you're verifying said code. And so we realized in SAMM 2.0, we're like, we really need implementation. Because we've gone away from waterfall where there is just this ton of stuff beforehand and then a ton of stuff after. And we just said, hey, you write code in the middle. But when you get into agile, DevOps, and the rest of that, all of a sudden there's a whole lot more involved with code. And so we went through and we said, all right, we're going to break the mold and we're going to go into a 5th business function. Up until this point, we fairly tracked with BSIM, relatively speaking, at the very high level. If you read the details of what's under BSIM and you read the details of what's under SAMM, they diverged a good bit ago. It's the general high level you can do comparisons on. So these are the primary areas that we updated in SAMM 2.0 in terms of like all the details that we went through with it. And if you break it down, the other thing that we did in SAMM 2.0 is we said there are streams. And so within each of these security practices, there's essentially stream A and stream B. And they're more progressive in terms of they move more down the line of maturity. To your question on self-assessment, Scott, it's the human squishy side. It's gonna absolutely be objective or subjective, especially when you do your own. It's actually kind of subjective even with a third party, because third parties will give you different types of credit based on their experience. If you self-assess, there's a risk to self-assess. And I'll talk about that in benchmark, where you have like mentioned in the chat, there's an incentive not to be too bad. You need to be reasonably well. And so you'll kind of cheat on that a little bit sometimes. And it depends on the person running it, not always. But when we break SAMM out this way, we now have like some more groups, more areas we can focus on, more control. Again, if you notice, it's very symmetrical. There's pros and cons to running a symmetrical model. Sometimes it'll feel like there's a little more filler in some places, and some other places you feel like you're short on something. And it's a balance. So one of the things, because all good security tools need to start in Excel, right? That's the number one security piece of software that we run is Excel. So we prototype things in Excel. So one of the things that we have for SAMM is the most portable. Yeah, why not? What's wrong with macros? Macros. Excel demos don't normally crash. If we have time, I can show you it moving, but honestly, it's drop downs and formulas and stuff. It's not super fancy Excel. We need to keep it reliable. We don't get super fancy. But the idea is you also get some quality criteria. You get some guidance in terms of like what we kind of mean by the question. Also, kind of to your point, Scott, which is kind of interesting, if you ask 4 different people how you run a SAMM assessment, you will probably get different answers. Some people hand the questionnaires out and have people fill them out. Some people will fill a questionnaire out in a live session. If you have somebody running the SAMM assessment with enough experience, I highly recommend simply doing it conversationally. The person running it knows what questions need to be answered, but you can just sit there and you can ask. You can say, so tell me how your development process is. Tell me how you build software. Tell me how you manage software dependencies. And so you can work through questions and answers and get them to explain like their whole process. And so for them, it's more enlightening. They've been able to tell you stories and you're far more likely to get more data. If you sit there and say, do you have solid knowledge of what dependencies you're relying on? And you just ask them rigid questions, you're going to get rigid answers and you're going to miss stuff. So in my experience, doing more of a conversational interview session is much more useful when doing SAMM assessments. You can't really do that to yourself in a self-assessment, but you know. So the idea is also with benchmark is we'll give you, we want to have web-based. And so we have a few, like there's been a few projects contributed to SAMM. What if the answers were doing some for each item, but not all? Well, then you generally answer some.
It's maybe I'll just unmute myself. That was one of the challenges I ran into with this framework before. So for example, let's say, is the build process fully automated? Well, I mean, there I can pick yes for some applications, right? But maybe I'm doing it for some applications, but it's not fully, it's partially automated. Maybe I'm doing a couple of the things and not all of them. How do I indicate the partial part? Is what I'm trying to
the partial
yeah like I'm only doing one out of the, like under number 2, maybe I'm only doing out of the sub bullets, maybe I'm only doing one of them and not all 3.
And that is a challenge, right? So the question, so getting to that level of depth, right, where you have your partials is something we're trying to work out because it's harder. So the line items in here that you see is the first round of trying to get into not just quantity, because most of the answers are quantity. Like I do it for some of my apps, I do it for most of my apps, or their quantity of time, like how frequent do I do something?
But what if you have like a, SaaS, a lot of our clients that we deal with, their SaaS company, they just have one application. So it's not so much about how many applications, it's more about how much of that process is mature. Like for that automation, given that they only have one application, their SaaS company, are they fully automated or are they partially automated or are they almost there? You know what I mean? That would be like, that would be something that I'd like to know how to measure if that's possible.
Well, and that's part of the challenge with the model right now is we struggle in that space.
Gotcha.
I've let people cheat a bit and use the sum in terms of, instead of quantity, doing it in terms of coverage or quality. Because if
I
you
think
only
that's
have
what I
one
did. I
app,
think, yeah, right, Brian. I think that's what I did with one of our clients. I kind of did it that way to, yeah, exactly.
yeah, because you find ways, you're like, I need to give you some credit, so we're going to say like, this is where you're at.
Awesome.
Because in reality, the answers are kind of made into human language so that people kind of understand, like, they're all despite the wording, they're all basically no, some, half, most. And so to me, when I run them, I'm flexible on what exactly I'm counting in those steps, in terms of, I don't always mean, oh, this is broad number of applications. The other interesting thing we run into is, and I'm dealing with this now working with RabbitV stuff, is even though SAMM is supposed to be for everybody, it's strange, right? So for everybody is really difficult to put into a model, because if you are, say, a Fortune 500, Fortune 100, you need a lot more formality. You need more documentation, you need more structure, you need center of excellence kinds of things. You need stuff like that to be able to get people to work together. When you're a company that has 40 developers, you don't want any of that. That's painful. That's way too much overhead for the total capability that you have as an organization. So now I come down to what is most beneficial for a really small company in that sense, and it's your culture. But then the question becomes is like, how do you measure culture? Like, who measures culture? And so that's something I'm trying to figure out right now, is I'm trying to say, is there a way that we can say, it's not necessarily SAMM light, but we have tiers saying you are a particular size, and we're trying to narrow things down a little bit and say, if you're below this size, then there's different questions or different ways to answer these questions. But I'm still trying to work that out, because once you start breaking the model out of just a single model, things get really complicated really fast.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So one of the dashboards we have, again, this is all Excel and fun cell shading right now. Working on the web app, that's in part of Benchmark and some other donations. But this gives you a breakdown and says, hey, you know, your contributions. So within the different practices, within the functions, they'll tell you, hey, what activities within different maturity levels contribute. In the original SAMM model, only would score you when you totally completed one maturity level. So you would complete one, and then you would only be given credit once everything in one was done. And then you could go to 2, and only when everything is 2, then you can go to 3. Sparklines aren't a bad idea. Maybe sometime when I get back to it. But then we realized that people would sometimes, depending on what their company was, what technology they were using, sometimes they'd skip over some of the 1s or the 2s, and they'd end up on the higher ends. Sometimes they'd put more into the 3s, and it just had to do with what was the maturity of their organization. Sometimes they found ways around not needing to do the activities that were in 1. So that was also part of the change in 1.5, as we said, we got to give you credit for things you do. So regardless of if you follow some linear path or not, you're working on it. You're getting benefit from it. You're getting, anyway, we want to make sure you get credit, because otherwise, why would you do that, right? So if you've done some really advanced things, but you didn't do some simple little step 1 because you didn't need to, I can't punish you for that in the scoring. So from my perspective, when you're trying to run SAMM assessments, really you need buy-in from stakeholders. They need to come and they need to be willing to talk to you. We typically recommend doing risk-based approach in terms of trying to figure out what makes sense. And honestly, we want to integrate the whole idea, right? So security AppSec especially used to think they were a great unicorn. They needed their super special process on top of the other processes you did. And it took us way too many years to realize, you know what, we really just need to augment whatever process you're using. We need to be part of your regular flow. And one of the big things that SAMM can do is it can help provide visibility. So it helps give you like, hey, if we accomplish these particular tasks, we increase a number, we move up to the right, we do something that's measurable. So that's the hope for it. Now, to an early question, SAMM versus BSIM. So SAMM can sort of map to BSIM. If you notice by names, you have strategy and metrics, policy and compliance, compliance and policy, education and guidance, training. You can see where they were built, and they were very similar to each other on that. But now that SAMM has a 5th business function, the mappings are a little more difficult when we move across them. So I wrote this I guess this is about a year and a half ago now, down in 2020. This is probably the most read blog post on the SAMM site. Just because I just broke down and basically my goal was to be completely neutral, because for some people, BSIM makes more sense than SAMM. It just depends where they are, what size their organization is, and what their goals are. Oh, the Concord USA, that was an old one that somebody wrote a while ago. I don't believe it's maintained anymore. It still shows up, but I don't think anybody's doing it. There was a gentleman that worked at Concord that was participating with SAMM, and they built one. The newer one is SAMWise, and it's built by a crew. I think they're out of New Zealand, hence the Lord of the Rings reference to SAMWise. But it's SAMM with 2 M's. So we have contributions, and we're getting more apps for that. But then we get into the inevitable question about benchmarking. It's like, so the first question that I always get when somebody does SAMM is like, how do I compare? Like, am I doing well? Like in knowing that I can't outrun the bear, am I running faster than somebody else, right? Will the bear pick on somebody other than me? And that's an interesting question to answer. And that's where one place where BSIM has an advantage, because BSIM has a standard structured process. They have a single source. They have a single process to follow. They have a limited number of people that can conduct assessments. So there is an advantage to, like, you have that single pipeline. The disadvantage from my perspective for BSIM is that typically the organizations that go through BSIM are much larger. You look at the average software security group number, and I think it's over 10. It's in the low teens. When I ran the AppSec team at FedEx, we had 6. We had 4,000 developers and project managers, and we had 6 people in what we would have called the SSG. So those are organizations that have a lot of resources. And the other interesting difference between BSIM and SAMM is BSIM will tout them, they're descriptive, and SAMM says they're prescriptive, and there's pros and cons to both. So prescriptive is more setting out in advance, hey, here's a roadmap, try to follow it. Descriptive says this is what the industry is doing. We're not trying to tell you what to do. We're trying to measure what is being done. The one thing that we really want to do within SAMM is not only do we want to know what people do, we want to know if it was useful. Because I have this fear with BSIM that just because a few of the organizations start doing something, the others start doing it. And so more organizations do it, but I don't know if it's a good thing to do. I don't know if it's being done simply because other organizations are doing it. Scott, you could, absolutely. And again, it would depend. So his question in chat is, why not use SAMM to compare apps or org units internally in an organization? And you're hitting on it. The challenge would be generally the governance stream is fairly common across all the components within an org, in theory, right? It really depends on the structure and the culture in your organization. A lot of times operations is too. But if you look at the design, the implementation, and the verification, a lot of times those are much more isolated. I've seen teams do that. My experience was more an organization would measure individual business units and then they would consolidate it all together for upper management. But they would have some level of competition within the internal units because no VP or senior VP wants to be the one who's on the bottom of the barrel for the scoring. Like they don't want to be the one that drags down the average. So the goal in benchmarking is trying to build the most comprehensive data set, right? So we want to advance the industry. We want people to be able to collaborate and say, this works for us. This is what makes sense. Because we also think that this will also help drive future iterations of the model. Because if there's something the model's missing, then hopefully like contributions in the benchmark will help build that, to help point to say, hey, this element, this practice in SAMM is no longer being used by anybody. Maybe we should remove it and replace it with something else. Maybe there's something better to have that. Where the majority of drivers believe that they're above average. Yeah, that's how we self-assess, right? I have to be above the midline. I feel sorry for everyone else who's below the midline that drags the midline down, but you know, it can't be me. Yeah, I think the benchmark's gonna be interesting in that respect. And Scott, you do bring up another good point. One of the big benefits of SAMM is it's fairly vendor agnostic. You can do it yourself. You could find one of a number of different security consultancies that will do SAMM assessments for you. And if you didn't like them, you can find another one where you can take it over. That's one of the disadvantages of BSIM is there's one and only one org you can work with to do BSIM. Granted, they've been really good at marketing and they've been really good building the conference and the community, and I definitely have to hand it to them that they've done well in that space. But our hope in benchmarking is that we get two different types of data. We want to be able to take the self-assess. We want to be able to take the consultancies that perform the third-party assessments. So the interesting thing to that, well, I'll get to that in just a second. But in the infrastructure itself, this has been part of the challenge. It's like, how do we build a neutral area that people are willing to let some of their data sit, right? Like, how do you have a fully neutral third party that's not trying to make money off of you from this, selling you ads, trying to upsell you on services, that kind of thing. So we're planning to set it up in Azure. There'll be a minimal number of administrators that have access to any of the raw data. And the idea is we'll have dashboards and a comparative analysis. You'd be able to you could either import SAMM in there, or you could run manage SAMM assessments from within the app itself. But the idea is not only at a point where we have enough data, not only can you say, how do I compare, but you can start slicing and say, hey, this geographic area or this industry or this company size. So you get that kind of idea. So you're comparing yourself against somebody you should be comparing yourself against. Because if I'm a 80 developer company, I do not want to compare myself against UPS or Microsoft or Apple or something. I'm not going to win that game. It's going to hurt. So the interesting challenge, though, it goes back to what I mentioned about BSIM, is cost, or not. Well, cost is part of it, but looking at consistency, right? Quality of data. So third-party assessments in general are more likely to be higher quality. They're specialists. They're people who do it regularly. They have not as much incentive to attempt to cheat the system. So in general, I would imagine on average, that's higher quality, more accurate data. So you have that, but then you have self-assessments, right? So self-assessments have to be taken with a grain of salt at times. just because you're not quite that objective. You're just not. So that's one of the things we want to classify too. Like if you want to, and we'll mark the data with these tags and such, but if you want to, at some point when the data set gets large enough, you can say, hey, I only want to see third-party contributions, or I only want to see self-assessment contributions, or I'm okay with having both in my set for reporting. The idea we looked at it, so the scenario 4 is there because we're still talking about it. We're not terribly crazy about a completely anonymous scenario. We understand that there are people who are good at it, and when they do self-assessments, they simply don't want to tell you who they are because they're afraid you might use it against them. I ran into the same thing with data contributions for the OWASP top 10. The vast majority of the contributions were from third parties that did testing, because most internal companies are not willing to divulge their internal testing findings. When the OWASP Top 10 2017 went out, I was working at Microsoft and I tried to get them to contribute their internal metrics for their testing related to the top 10. And there was over 500,000 findings that I had from the 3-year window. And I almost got out the door of them, and somebody in legal was like, we're not going to do it. They said, well, what happens? They're like, we may have fixed every single one of these things before it ever went to production. But all it takes is somebody to go pop out and write a blog post that says, hey, Microsoft had 500,000 vulnerabilities in their software. And the whole thing goes down. So. Scott saying you want to look bad to get funding, but not bad enough that someone else is hired to spend the funds. Yeah, it's an interesting balance, right? You can't look too good, you never get funding. You can't look so bad that they're like, well, we need to replace you with somebody else. Yeah, I've seen people play with the numbers. It happens. So we've tried to come up with different ways, right? Where somebody can say, hey, I can contribute. And I allow you to say I contribute to SAMM benchmark. Now, we're not saying we will tell people what your score is. We're saying that you put yourself on a list and you say, hey, I am from, whichever. So I'm from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'm going to allow you to say, hey, we contribute to SAMM. Not to say we contribute to SAMM and here's our scores. So the idea is the scores are still kept separate from the organization that contributed them. Then you can have contributors that aren't publicly identified. And then we're considering scenario 3 where the contributor is known but doesn't want a mapping in the data set, to where the SAMM team or the administrators, the people managing benchmark, know where it came from. So they know it's not purely anonymous. They have someone to reach out to. They have some level of vetting they can do to make sure that data is still relatively accurate. And that's our biggest concern with the anonymous, is not that it's likely that somebody would flood junk data, but the higher the quality of the data, the more useful benchmark is. And so we were trying to make sure that we have high quality data. Right now, basically, we're spinning it up. So we're working on the project. Unfortunately, it's been too many years. Go back and see my previous note about how much free time I have. It is, I mean, that is a viable consideration, that like if it's purely anonymous, somebody be willing to be completely honest. I haven't discounted that, which is why we haven't removed the 4th option. I just have to also consider the main likely, right? Wouldn't it be easy to set attribution? So you're looking, Dana's looking ahead slightly. So yeah, so the elements, right? So this is the and we thought about that too, Scott. You basically get to report compared to what you've contributed. The biggest problem we have right now is we have people saying, hey, how do I measure up, but I don't want to contribute? Like if all I get is people looking for measurements and nobody's willing to give data, then I have nobody to measure against. So that's been one of the bigger challenges. But part of that, I think, is because we just don't have that consistent software package yet to say, hey, here's the system, here's how we can manage it. So we're basically, the idea is, I have a number of data sets that I'm working that I'll seed the system with. We're finishing up use cases, requirements. We'll be doing development over the next probably 6 or 8 months or so. The goal is to have something before the end of the year that people can be able to run stuff against and look into. You'll be able to upload, CSV or a JSON. The plan is to potentially have a hook, into the toolbox, the Excel spreadsheet, because for some people, the Excel spreadsheet's the only version they can use. That's the only one they can distribute. They don't have, they're not allowed to use some central system for it. And I get the slight paranoia, but at the same time, the realistic side of me says, hey, if I divulged a pen test report that said, hey, by the way, there is SQL injection at this particular URL and this function on this page, yeah, somebody may take advantage of that. If I learn that your organization has an operational score of 1.38, not entirely sure how much good that's really going to do me. Like, is that going to incentivize me as an attacker to go after you at that point? Maybe it does, but I don't think it's as likely as some people fear, that you would go through, look at the report of a bunch of SAMM scores and then say, I'm going to go pick on this organization that's the lowest score, if you could figure out who it was. But yeah, it's a challenge, right? To collect enough metadata to let people compare themselves against people that are similar without divulging who the organization is, right? So if you have a very large organization, technology centric in North America, right, that starts to narrow things down, depending on what industry you pick and what sizes and things. So that's a challenge that we're trying to figure out, because we want to be able to collect enough data to provide meaningful metrics and benchmark, but not so much that people are like, I can't contribute because everyone would know who I was. So I'll look at Zendesk's data. I haven't looked at their stuff in a while, so I'll see. That might be something that's usable in that space. But let's see. I've got a few minutes left, right? It looks like.
Yeah, you got 15 minutes. You're good.
Okay, cool. Let's say my watch died. I didn't charge it last night, so I was like looking at an empty wrist. So one of the things that I got pulled into because of working on SAMM is there was a collaboration between the Center for Internet Security and EAC, and then also primarily there's an organization called Turnout Rocks that runs a lot of the actual effort underneath it. But the concept was put out by, I think it was led by Aaron Wilson when it started. But the idea is to do rapid architecture-based election technology verification. And so really what it is for voting systems, there are standards. Not the greatest standards in my opinion, but there are some standards. Where everything that's considered non-voting election technology, there is no standard. There's just nothing. They do what they can. Different states give them different rules and regulations, different requirements. But it's painful, right? When you start creating poll books or election night reporting, voter registration databases, stuff like that. If you work with 8 different states, you have 8 different sets of requirements, 8 different certification cycles, 8 different people yelling at you for different things. Well, at least 8 different groups of people yelling at you for different things. So the idea is could we build a process that would be rapid to where we could not only do an initial assessment, but we could do follow-up assessments. So when you did versions of your software, could we be able to quickly enough test so that we could say, hey, yes, here's a level of assurance for that software. And so the idea was to be able to do this for all non-voting technology, because there just is no real standard for it. And so we went down and we're doing something that's fairly unique. So most of these types of assessment programs or certification programs are testing simply the implementation of the software. And so when you try to do that, it's heavy because you don't know where they regressed, you don't know what changed, you don't know, and the bigger they are, the more complicated it is. So you've got manual pen testing, you've got code review, you got tool-based stuff. So we went at it from a little bit different perspective. We said, we want to know what the risk of change is within your system, right? After we do an initial assessment, how much testing do we really need to do on a change? And to know how risky a change is, there's really three primary areas we need to look at. We need to look at how your process is. Like, how mature is your development process? And that's where SAMM comes in. But we also look at, like, how mature is your architecture? Like, did you have a decent design? Do you have a good architecture that you've built the software with? And then you look at, like, saying, hey, let's validate your implementation. Let's validate what claims you've made for the security of your system. And it's really the combination of the three that determines A, where you're at, and then B, how much testing we need to do for you in future iterations. Basically, how much risk is there when you change something? So we took SAMM, but then we also added, because this is bigger in the election space, we also added usability and accessibility. So we put it under, we added another function of human factors. And so it's not strictly security, but it is related to it. And so we generally term it SAMM Plus internally. But then we've also added, we've grouped things, right? So we had different types of categories that we map some of the SAMM practices to. And so it's like, how well do you manage third party? How well do you manage internal development? How well do you manage your environment? Because those are different types, different areas that you're looking at in terms of levels of maturity and risk. And so those get fed into a testing matrix later in terms of determining if you come in and you've made changes in these particular areas, what type of testing? Like, do we just do a delta? Is it something really lightweight? Do we really need to do a full architecture redo? Things like that. So we're on second round of the pilot right now. Some organizations are on their second time, so we're able to start seeing revision data. And we've got some other organizations that are coming in for their first time. So it's actually quite fascinating. And it's one of the few things I've seen in industry that we're trying to go through and measure the maturity or security of architecture. And we're looking at it both from a threat model, logical standpoint, and also from an implementation standpoint, in terms of how well did you implement the architecture. In terms of structure, not necessarily like, did I forget and I accidentally used a dynamic SQL query in a particular piece of code. It's more of, did I implement the right security controls at the right places within the architecture? This is my, come look at our stuff, come take care, look, read about us, contribute. So we have OWASPSAMM.org. We have a GitHub repo. We had SAMM User Day, so we do that a couple times a year. We have a newsletter. We have in OWASP Slack, we have a Project SAMM channel. So come read about it, contribute to it if you're interested. Help us solve some of the hard problems. Embrace being able to see this. So that's to your question, Dana, that's interesting for state and federal government. So some of the states are actually getting quite interested in it in terms of like looking at a common standard. The vendors are absolutely interested because if somebody could come along and create some kind of standard that the states would accept, they would be all for that because that would ease a lot of pain that they have right now. A ton of time is being spent keeping many separate states happy. So it's a challenge because each one has its different idea of what it thinks is super important. And so, I mean, and the thing with elections is the more we go electronic on elections, the more we lose our primary defense in elections. And that is the massive distributed nature of elections. But I had a student, somebody mentioned Rickroll. I had a student who tried to Rickroll me in his final submission. So he submitted his final project and it looks like a link to his GitHub repo, but under the covers, it's actually YouTube Rickrolling. And I was like, all right, he's going to get a bonus point for that. If you have questions for me, you can find me. Most platforms like Twitter and such, I'm InfoSec Dad. I managed to get that before other people did on most things. There's also, I'm Brian.glass because my name is fairly unique and you can probably pick a couple of dozen domains that have an email address like that on. Gmail, OWASP, that kind of stuff. But, all right, so that's the end of my screen.
Great presentation.
Any other questions, anyone? Thank you.
Now's your chance to unmute yourself if you have any questions. I think everyone's just like, oh my God.
It's been 2 hours.
So much.
So when do we have a next meetup, Dana?
The next meetup. Next meetup. So these are on the third Thursday of every month.
So for June, it's the
yes.
PNW conference.
We're yes, Pacific Northwest. Yes, Amran, tell us more.
No, shut. You tell us more.
It's going to be great. It's all our chapters are joining up. You know, Vancouver chapter, the Seattle, Portland, and Victoria. Next year, also Bellingham, and we're joining forces to bring you a great day of learning. And it's June 11, so it'll be from I think 9:30 to about 5-ish. It's official is 10 to 5, and then we're going to do a networking hour from 5 to 6. So registrations are open. Go to AppSec PNW Sec. I'll send it. Oh yeah, the link is shared already. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah. So there's not going to be a regular meetup. In June, we're going to be doing the Pacific Northwest. It's a big event, collaboration of multiple OWASP chapters. There's going to be a meetup in July, and we're preparing a practical hands-on workshop, and hopefully it all aligns and works out well. I'm almost certain, but it's going to be a fun event for sure. And I personally like hands-on events a lot because that's how I learn better rather than, listening to people talk and then forgetting everything about it the next day. So make sure you join that one as well.
Actually, the quick show of reactions. Thumbs up if you would come out to a physical workshop in the end of July. July 21st is what we're thinking. In the evening, 6 to 9.
Everyone's still awake. Amar, would you come? I know Raz might come.
I would.
If you absolutely wouldn't come, thumbs down are good too. If you're still pandemic shy, that's okay.
Amar's coming. JH is coming. I'm sure Raz would come.
Yeah, I'll come for sure.
I rarely make it into Vancouver these days.
Oh, that's right. You're in Squamish.
Yeah.
I've been promised beer, so.
Well, I'll take you to dinner at Eatery after, Raz.
I miss that place.
I know.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording, but we still can stick around a couple minutes. So just 1 second.
Please fill out the survey. It really helps us make the meetups better.